I think there are a couple of things that I'd like to talk about that are kind of interesting. When I was a very young kid, I always had this. There was an advert on the television for it was to encourage you to go to a technical college when you left school.
Right.
It was a cartoon, and it had this big guy on one side of the table and a little kid on the other side of the table, and it was this careers talk basically, and it was a case of, well, Johnny, what would you like to do when you leave school? And you heard all of the thoughts of this little boy going through his head. You know, it was all, I want to be a footballer, I want to be a this, I want to be a that. And then when he actually opened his mouth, he thought, I think I'd like to be an engineer, or I'd like an apprenticeship or something like that. Well, when I had the equivalent school talk when I was about 15 in Ferry Hill, I walked into the room and I had all these thoughts going through my head, pretty much like that little boy, only it was, I want to be a pop star.
Right.
I want to be a rock and roll guitarist. That's what I want to be. But I actually said it. And
what was his response then?
The response wasn't particularly good. No, but what would you really want to do? You know, and I said, no, I really would like to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that at that time, which would have been about 1973, 74, we were all the sort of close friendship group that I had at the time. We were all very interested in sort of music that was a little bit on the edge, things that were a little bit challenging. We liked all kinds of experimental musics. I think, for instance, in amongst all of the stuff that we were buying, I think most of my group of friends had gone out and hadn't been able to resist paying 48p for an LP and bought an album by Faust. Mm-hmm. Because Virgin had released an album called the Faust Tapes, which was 48p, and who could resist that? And we found ourselves listening to sort of really, really, really extreme avant-garde music, which I don't think any of us were probably prepared for at 13 or 14 or however old we were at the time. But we were following bands that were kind of pushing the boundaries, I think, sonically a little bit. They didn't fit nicely into any categories of being kind of heavy metal or prog rock. So you'd get these bands that came along that were marketed as glam rock bands, but they were bands like Roxy Music, which certainly had all of the outward accoutrements of glam rock, but they had a music that was quite different and was made up of this sort of elements of bands like Sha Na, but then these other sort of, so you had the doo-woppy thing going on in their first album, but then this extreme noise synthesizer and this rock and roll guitar and these honking saxophones, and that was kind of a really different sound. I think a lot of people of my age were either attracted to or completely repelled by. You know, and I remember going, being in Ferry Hill, which was a small mining town in County Durham. The mine had closed in 1966, and most of the people from round about went off and they did other things. They were working in Black and Decker factories and Courtaulds and people like that, companies like that. And the job prospects weren't fantastic, and this was an escape. This kind of strange music, almost otherworldly music, was an escape. And I think, you'll probably remember from your own experiences of that period of time that there were lots and lots of interesting things happening, but there weren't huge amounts of people interested in them.
You had to kind of look for it, didn't you?
It was a minority appeal. You were very much part of almost an exclusive club. But there was underneath it all, there was this real deep love of music. And I'd sort of played guitar in a very haphazard kind of way since I was about 12. And I'd tried to form bands with kids who I went to school with. Notably Robert Blamire, and we had a couple of attempts at bands together. Robert was originally a guitarist, and Gary Smallman, who's a little bit younger than the rest of the people who eventually became Penetration. Mm-hmm. So Gary and I had a band, and Gary and Robert and I had a band, and there was then this other thing emerged, which was a friend of mine called Steve Jacobs. Well, he was also a friend of Robert's, school friend of Robert's, and he was a drummer, and a young lad called Alan Hetherington. So there was Alan, Robert, myself, and Steve Jacobs, and we had a band, and I think we did maybe 1 or 2 gigs at a school disco or something like that. But the thing that was interesting about it, I think, was that right from the get-go we were writing our own songs, and we'd not really spent much time with learning other people's songs, partly because we couldn't do the flashy guitar solos, and we weren't accomplished enough musicians, but we could write our own songs. I've got to say, these weren't anything like punk rock, and nothing like Penetration. But we did try and write our own material, and there was the usual covers of Rolling Stones songs and things like that, the simple stuff that we could work out how to play. So that went along, and we all left school and got jobs and did various things, but all the time had different bands, and I'd had little bands with Gary Small, and these were really youth club rehearsal bands. They were.
Can you describe the kind of sound that was coming out of you then?
Well, it was guitar driven, and it was kind of, I suppose, there were elements of all of that stuff that we'd been listening to. So we were very keen on Cockney Rebel. We liked Cockney Rebel a lot. Right. So there were elements of Cockney Rebel. There were elements of Roxy music and David Bowie, and there were also. So we were all listening to things like Iggy and the Stooges and the New York Dolls, because that had actually sort of filtered through by then, and we were aware of it. So there were elements of all of that stuff in there. Right. But it was very eclectic and somewhat, I wouldn't say directionless, but without a specific focus. Mm-hmm.
Rocking like a bitch man, acting pretty kitsch man, rocking like a bitch, standing like a queen, yeah, a brilliant, yeah, standing like a queen. Lisa nearly burned my mouth, but she laughed as she put it all out, what she did.
And then this thing happened, and I think it sort of really started to raise its head probably about 1975, really. And the first things that we heard that were so different, we were listening to all kinds of different stuff, and I think that, you know, very much at that time, and if you've got to consider the age of the kids who we were at the time, we were all 15, 16, 17, you know, around about that age group, very, very easily influenced. So whatever that album was that we'd just bought and listened to non-stop was probably the thing that was filtering through into the music that we did in some way. Naturally. But in a very limited way in terms of our abilities in musicianship. But then things started appearing, like the first Patti Smith album, and we'd all been big fans of the Velvet Underground. You know, we'd bought Velvet Underground probably because we'd heard David Bowie talk about it, and probably because we'd deciphered stuff on the back of the cover of Hunky Dory and wondering what's this, a little VU white light returned with thanks, and with you do your research, you know, the wonder of the album sleeve. You would look at that stuff and you would then sort of go and hunt out what these things were. So I suppose we were what would now be called cool hunters, only we probably weren't very cool. So we looked at all of this stuff, and it eventually kind of started to turn into something that was a bit more individualistic, and these influences came out in our songs. So, and when we were doing cover versions, we would do cover versions of Velvet Underground songs, and for a whole bunch of reasons. One was they were easy to play, and they were a bit different, and it wasn't All Right Now and all the stuff that all the other bands that we'd heard of were doing. And I think the other salient factor about the band that eventually became Penetration was that we never got any gigs.
So you didn't perform?
We didn't
any
really.
Of this live?
We didn't really perform.
Right.
I believe that we acquired a name round about my. Well, we went on I used to. One of the things I did as a kid, Ferry Hill's a long way away from Newcastle, and Newcastle is where all the bands played. So I would organise bus trips. Right. I would book as a sort of 14, 15-year-old, I would book a coach from a company called Grierson's, and we would get the coach to pick us up in Ferry Hill. I would have gone up to Newcastle to the City Hall box office and purchased the requisite number of tickets. Right. For the people who were coming along, and we'd go up to Newcastle, do a bit of underage drinking, and then go and do watch a performance by one of these bands. One of these gigs was Roxy Music, right. And I think if you talk to any of the other early members of Penetration, you'll probably get something like this story. Pauline was one of the passengers with her boyfriend of the time, Peter Lloyd. It was one of the passengers on this bus, and I'd known Pauline before this, but we got to talking, and I said, would you like to sing in this band that we've got, which at that point in time was actually Stephen Jacobs on drums, Alan Hetherington on bass, and me on guitar, and we were kind of a trio at the time. And I think Robert Blamire had sort of semi-retired at the time, at the ripe old age of 17. And anyway, we went along. She said she would give it a go, so we started performing together at that point. And I think we had a name which Pauline reminded me not so long ago. We called ourselves the Points. And so the Points was the name of the band prior to Penetration. Awful name. And I think, although this is open to some debate, I think we actually played at Middlesbrough Rock Garden. I think I got us a gig at Middlesbrough Rock Garden as the Points. Certainly we did a gig with Alan Hetherington at Middlesbrough Rock Garden. Right. And shortly thereafter, I have a vague recollection that we played at the Alternative Rock Society at Newcastle Poly as well.
What year we're talking about here?
I think we're talking about 1976.
Right, early 76.
Early 76. So punk was happening.
Were you conscious of that by that
Oh
time?
yeah. We knew that was going on because, and I know that this has happened because when Alan resigned from the band, and Alan was a very sensitive young man, a little bit younger than us, and an extremely talented musician. And I mean, when I say extremely talented, he was a classically trained musician. He played all sorts of things, beautiful piano player. His dad was the music teacher at our school,
right.
And he had a golden future ahead of him, and I think punk rock wasn't for him. So Alan left, and when Alan left, I said to Robert, we need a bass player. Do you think you could do that? Well, Robert didn't have a bass guitar, so he traded in his 6-string electric guitar at a place called Bell Accordions in Newton Aycliffe, which a lot of people in the Newton Aycliffe area will know of, and anyone from that era will remember Bell Accordions adverts in the music papers for strange looking Hagstrom guitars and stuff like that. But Robert acquired a bass, and we started to practice as a 4-piece with Steve Jacobs, Robert, myself and Pauline. And we were starting to write the songs at this point that became Penetration's early repertoire, if you like. We used to, Peter Lloyd, Pauline's boyfriend at the time, and myself, we used to abuse the telephone systems of our employers and our parents. And I would phone people up on a lunchtime and say, we've got a band, we're from, well, I never used to say we're from Ferryhill, because even with my level of naivety, I did understand that people from London didn't know what Ferryhill was, especially the way I would say it. I used to say we're from the northeast, and if your band's ever playing in the area, can we support them, please? And a level of persistence resulted in us getting some gigs. And I think the first, we played a couple of gigs locally, but the first gig we ever played with the lineup of Penetration that people would identify as the first lineup, not including Steve or Alan. So Gary Smallman, Robert Blamire, Pauline and myself. That was at the Roxy in April.
Really?
Of 1977.
See, that amazes me, because you look at a band, certainly from the northeast, you'd think you'd kind of even play some youth clubs or local pubs or something to get the Roxy.
I mean, but that's I think that's a result of the atmosphere, the things that were happening at the time, the fact that you could. I think that sums up the anything can happen attitude, you know, and also the fact that you were enabled, you were empowered. It was, the barriers were down. The music business, to all intents and purposes, as a business for punks, had been totally disassembled, and it was start again, build your own thing.
Tell me why you can't explain. You're only looking for fire new. Yeah, didn't they fool you? They wanna be you. Give me what we're free, we can live again. It didn't fool me, I fooled you. You wanna be me, yeah, you wanna be me. You wanna be someone, ruin someone, yeah. Tossed you out. I got you in a camera and I got you in my camera. A second of your life, ruined for life. You wanna ruin me in your magazine. You wanna cover us in margarine. And now is the time. You got the time to down
And we went all the way down to London. We played at the Roxy with Generation X, which was an interesting experience because they'd omitted to bring a PA system with them. Thankfully for them, we had one in the back of the van that we cobbled together a PA system. We met all manner of people because it was full of, well, the glitterati of the punk rock scene.
Celebrities now,
all of the celebrities. So you had the Slits were all there.
Can you describe walking down them steps?
Into the Roxy.
It's a basement, isn't it?
It was a basement, yeah.
Can you just describe what you were expecting and what you...
Well, it was the first of many clubs that I would go into that had a very sticky floor and a smell of stale alcohol. Right. And it was like strange going in on the afternoon to do the sound check and everything. And it was a bit of a huge adventure, you were very apprehensive about it. But full of stupid bravado for, you thought you could do anything. But going down there on the afternoon when it was empty was bizarre, because you didn't know what was going to happen. But then being in it later on, not the going down the stairs because you were already there, but it filling up with all of these people and strange looking individuals that you wouldn't have. I mean, we were fairly sober in our dress compared with some of the people who were there. It was an interesting experience. It was claustrophobic. It was dark. It felt a bit dangerous.
Did that bring a sense of excitement?
Yeah, absolutely. Don Letts was the DJ, and it was kind of an early experience of the reggae sound system. Very heavy dub, heavy bass, and you were listening to Tapazuki, MPLA, singers and players, and all of those sorts of, and all versions, all B-sides, and really, really quite extreme sounding music when played at that volume. Really a sort of a life-changing experience, I think.
Since music is a school of love, I can Tapazuki rock the musical atmosphere. Yeah. Move it. Yeah. Your naughty is your beauty. I say your naughty is your glory. I say your naughty is your soul. You got to be a nut to go on the MPLA, y'all.
And it felt like you were part of some kind of a scene all of a sudden. I think that's how kind of the Newcastle contingent were born. We became known as the Newcastle contingent, although none of us were from Newcastle. So yeah, really the gig went off fairly well. We got through the set. People didn't throw anything at us. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing in retrospect. And then we managed to get another gig, which was with the Adverts, which was the following day. And ironically, although that gig never took place, that event was the thing that kicked things off for Penetration.
Is this something to do with the Portuguese?
It is, yeah.
Football.
This is, yeah.
Fans?
What happened was we were booked in to play a gig with the Adverts at a place called Mallet Hall, which is right bang slap in the centre of London. And it was booked by Peter Lloyd with this guy called Rui de Castro, who'd had a sort of an involvement. He had this band, and he put out a record which was kind of proto-punk on his own label. Anyway, we turned up on the afternoon, us and the Adverts, who we became firm friends with. And we had our gear on the stage, and there were banqueting tables laid out in this massive, beautiful room, a sprung hardwood floor, and at the back there was a massive buffet and loads of wine. I mean, wine, so much wine you wouldn't believe. And we thought it was there for us, so we had some. And it wasn't. Turns out it was for this reception. There's a little bit of confusion. Some people think that it was a wedding reception, Portuguese wedding reception, well, which you may have heard. I thought it was a reception for a Portuguese, not the Portuguese football team. And there were going to be lots of wives and children, and certainly it looked that way. In retrospect, looking back, it looked like there was going to be some kind of a reception. And we apparently had been booked as the cabaret, which must have, it's good that we didn't play really, because it would have been an event that would have gone more disastrously wrong if we'd played than we didn't, and we probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if we'd actually played. But we spied a 4-track tape recorder sitting backstage that Mr. De Castro had set up, and we were full of rightful indignation, and we complained about this and said, "You're not recording us," because we thought we'd be ripped off. I mean, how arrogant is that, really? So a discussion, shall we say, ensued, and we decided that we weren't going to play, and we didn't perform. So the Adverts and ourselves left, and we hightailed it back up the motorway. I think that weekend we went to see John Cale at the Roundhouse as well. That was great. In fact, I think we might have done that instead of doing the gig.
Trying to get quicker, and the creepers get hung.
we came back up to the northeast, and again abusing work's telephone system. I phoned up Phil Sutcliffe
Sounds.
from Sounds, yeah, who was the new. I don't know how I found his number, but I managed to get his number. Probably rang Sounds, and Sounds said, you need to talk to our local person, and they gave him his number, and I told him how badly we'd been treated, and we were this band, we'd gone all the way down there, and other bands need to be warned about this man who's potentially bootlegging them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we did the same thing with the NME, and a guy called Phil McNeil wrote a very balanced piece in the NME about I don't know, about 2 or 3 columns, and gave both sides of the story, in fairness to him. Phil Sutcliffe wrote a little piece in Sounds and was then told, go and review them. Now, because of us getting gigs and things, and phoning people up and pestering people, we actually ended up with 2 gigs in the same week, very shortly after that, at Newcastle Poly, as was now Northumbria University. And we played on the Wednesday night of, this would be in May,
Right.
in May 77. We played on the Wednesday night, where we were headlining the Alternative Rock Society's gig.
Was this called the Bedrock Festival?
No, that's another gig, that's
I'm
afterwards.
jumping ahead here.
You're jumping ahead,
Sorry.
yeah, that comes up afterwards. And then on the Friday night, we played supporting Cherry Vanilla.
Mm.
And Cherry Vanilla had in her band Sting and Stuart Copeland
Right.
and Henri Padavoni, I think his name was,
He
who
was
was
the
the
original
first
drummer.
guitarist,
Oh, guitar.
first guitarist in the Police.
Right.
So the order of events was Penetration went on, and the Police lent us all their backline, so we didn't have to take any gear up, and we did a set. And then the Police went on, they did a set, and then the Police stayed on, and they were joined by a keyboard player and I think a saxophone player, and Cherry Vanilla came on and did her bump and grind set of New York
Yeah.
interesting things that has thankfully been forgotten.
Yeah.
And a review was published after that. Phil Sutcliffe was there. He wrote an ecstatic review, which was really, really helpful. That pricked up the ears of Richard Branson, who asked the people at the Virgin Shop in Newcastle to get a demo. We recorded a demo hastily in a youth club in Furry Hill, and we ended up ultimately getting a record deal after doing less than half a dozen gigs. And that is the story of how Penetration went from being sort of a youth club, church hall practice band to a band with a record deal in less than 6 months.
Penetrating voices going through my head. I haven't listened to a thing they've said.
it developed into a whole range of different things. Punk rock, I think, there were lots of strands and lots of interesting things at that time, and it was very, very exciting. I think we were all bowled over by the fact that we were being swept along with this wave of enthusiasm, and we got to play in fantastic places. I mean, with amazing people. You know, we played at the Electric Circus in Manchester. We did TVs with Tony Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
We when we played at the Electric Circus, we were very, very impressed, and I told you we made sort of firm friends with the adverts, and
Mm-hmm.
we on Jubilee Day we had a gig booked at the Guildhall in the Quayside in Newcastle, where the adverts were headlining and we were the support act, and I think Harry Hack and the Big G were on as well. And that was promoted by our then manager Pete Brent, who was the owner and sort of kingpin of Listen Here Records. And we went down to Manchester and did a gig shortly before that, and we were supported by this band who we were very impressed by.
Mm-hmm.
And we invited them up, and they came up to Newcastle in a Pantechnicon van, if you know what one of them is.
Describe.
An articulated lorry. Basically, they came up in an articulated lorry, parked up on the quayside, and when they played in Newcastle, they were called Warsaw, and I think that was the first gig they ever did as Warsaw. It had another name, which I forget.
Stiff Kittens.
Stiff Kittens, that's right. When they played with us in Manchester, and Warsaw became Joy Division, who ultimately became New Order. So we had I think we had an interesting time. You know, things like that happened. So you met people who went on to, you know, do amazing things. I mean, I remember doing gigs with the likes of Holly Johnson from Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and
Was he in big in Japan
he was
at
in
that
big
time?
in Japan, yeah. So there was all of that sort of thing. So we
played Eric's?
We played at Eric's, yeah. What was it? I think the Fall might have done their first gig supporting us as well.
Right.
Certainly an early one. That was at Rafters in Manchester. Couple of times at the Electric Circus. All sorts of interesting places. We'd travel all over the country really, and it was a weekend evenings, and it was an elaborate hobby for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we ever really thought that it was going to turn into anything bigger than that, a career. And for some of us, it didn't. So yeah, and it went on, and ultimately, we ended up with an interesting management arrangement with people who managed Status Quo and Rory Gallagher. And it was round about this time that I kind of became a little bit disenchanted with the music business in general. And ultimately, I walked away from a record deal with Virgin Records, and
Statistics. never gonna lose him again. Our love to try is all in vain. If never, never gonna lose him again.
So leaving Penetration and leaving Virgin Records,
Yeah,
which could have been a career,
yeah, could have.
were there sort of multiple reasons?
Oh
behind
yeah,
that?
it was a whole hodgepodge of things. I walked away from it really because of, I think, disenchantment. You know, it's very easy with the distance that I've now got between like 50-something Gary and 19-year-old Gary, to look back and rationalise it. But at the time, it was a very emotional time, I think. I was disenchanted with how the music, we'd been drawn into the music business machine, and there were things that I didn't really want to do. Things that I wanted to do that I was told I couldn't do by the management company. I was asked to write more songs like Don't Dictate, which I didn't really feel like doing at the time, and it might have been a mistake.
Yeah.
You know, looking back on it, I might have been a multimillionaire now if I'd written a few more, and we.
But it sounds like you had
But I hadn't written.
just the best part of Moving Targets written, didn't you? And that seemed to be very forward-looking. It
Yeah.
felt like you were moving forward there.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I actually left, the time I did a tour of Italy. The plan that I had was that I'd announced that I wasn't going to stay, but my plan was to record the album that became Moving Targets with them. So we recorded Don't Dictate in Worthing, and we recorded Firing Squad and some demos in the Old Kent Road at Manfred Mann's studio, and we then went to, this would be kind of, I don't know, early part of 78, and we went and did a two-week tour of Italy. It should have been 3 weeks, and we should have been supporting the Clash, but the Clash pulled out at the last minute because there were some political difficulties in Italy and they didn't want to get embroiled in it. And if you remember at the time, the Italians had the Red Brigade and various other things going on, and you were finding bankers shot in the back boots of cars in the streets of Rome, and it wasn't the same as it is now. We went out there and we did a tour, which was, I mean, there were some interesting things happened on the tour. It was my introduction to Euro disco. It was the first time I ever heard Euro disco.
Was that a positive thing?
It was at the time, yeah.
Right.
It was because it was about as extreme then as dub was. And there were these sort of what I understand now to be DJ mixes, you know, and I think both Peter Lloyd and I were absolutely sort of, I don't know, not blown away by it, but certainly interested in this thing that was going on, which we'd never heard anything like it before. We'd never been into these establishments. There was no rock in Italy to speak of. Everything was discos. So we were playing in these venues that were either like the talk of the town, or they were like Saturday Night Fever style discos with lighty up floors, which was kind of a bit strange. And we were all over the place. None of us spoke a word of Italian. We had an interesting time. Came back from Italy, and I did 2 gigs after we came back from Italy, and this would be in the February of 78. I played at Middlesbrough Rock Garden, and I played at London University, and London University was the last gig I played with the band. There were a few more gigs set up, and then we were supposed to be recording. And I developed, you know, understand I'd already announced that I was leaving, and I developed tendinitis in my left hand, and I couldn't play the guitar. And I think to fulfil the contractual obligations, the band recruited another guitarist, and It happened to be Neil who I'd been talking to, and I knew Neil and had shown him most of the songs, and I think that's how that happened. So I bowed out earlier than I thought, and the rest I don't have that much knowledge of, because by that time I'd left. So I left sooner than I would have intended to have left had I had my own way.
So you were hoping to complete the
I would
album?
have liked to have done the album, yeah, but it wasn't to be, and there might have been other songs on there. Bit of unfinished business there, probably.
This is the place. The lads come to die. This is the crossroads for you and I. To the left is a wilderness of animal fun. To the right is a vacuum of life in the sun. Behind is the dirt track that was our survival. Ahead the fear factories await our arrival. This is the place where we're spending our time. They call it the hotel. 1969. It's such a cute name for a nightmare machine. The bellboy wears jack boots. Keeps the place clean. Behind is a dirt track that was our survival. Ahead the fear factors await our arrival. Reversal boys with frozen shoulders, slouching around on those sleazy corners. Witness the high street existence.
So So you moved on. Did you move out of the music business altogether at that time?
Yeah, I did. I stopped doing it altogether for a little while, probably about six to 8 months. I was contractually tied up as well. It was difficult. So I didn't talk to anybody. Didn't talk to anybody in the press. I didn't give any big leaving speeches or anything like that.
Did you get plenty of attention from the press? Wondering.
I was asked a few times, and I never felt like it was worth talking to them about it. You know, I didn't want to get into any spats or anything like that. I walked away from it, and that was enough, really. And to be honest with you, the state of mind that I was in at the time, I didn't really want to dwell on that. I wanted to move on. I can't say that I didn't have ambitions to do things in music, and I did have other people that I played in bands with at the time, but nothing serious. You know, I just really wanted to get on with other things, and for a few years I did, really. I suppose I got on with all kinds of things until I was 23 when I went to university.
Right.
I probably should have gone when I was 18, but if I'd done that I would have probably left that.
Right. Rhythm Clicks?
Right, okay.
Come about.
Yeah, Rhythm Clicks was, again, you know, awful name.
Really?
Yeah, really. I hate the name. Always did. But anyway, Rhythm Clicks was, I think we only did about 3 gigs.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know how, I was thinking about this before I came through. I don't know quite how we ended up with the record deal. I met a guy called Tony Koscheva, who ran Red Rhino Records in York, and we got to talking and we became friends, and it was Red Rhino Records that offered us the opportunity to do some recording, and Tony was very good. I think I've got to say he was very good to us, and we went down to a studio in North Wales, just outside of Welshpool, called Fall Studios, which had been used by people like the Young Marble Giants, who I think were kind of John Peel favourites at the time. So we went down there and we recorded over a couple of days, and we had done some demos, which I tried to find, and I can't find them. I was going to do you a copy of them, but I couldn't find them anywhere. I know I do have some recordings of us at Spectro Arts Workshop, which we did a couple of gigs at. And we went down to Guardian in Durham, and we recorded about 4 or 5 tracks, and then based on them we went off. Tony Koscheva took us down to Wales, and we recorded the single that became Short Time, which I don't think it was a awfully successful recording, to be honest. It was a bit rushed, and I never really liked the sound of my own voice very much. So
was this the first time that you
thought
about singing?
Well, I'd sung in other bands before Penetration,
right.
but I'd never felt that I was a singer, really, to be honest with you.
In the Saturday rush hour, catch a set of a routine sales girl running for her bus, walking through the streets of forgettable faces, instantly forgettable you. It's so obvious, time is too short. It's so obvious, time is too short. Conversations sliced up on a non-stop conveyor belt of jokes and hopes and problems, and reflections in the window displays are converted into a symphony, or is it a comedy? It's so obvious, time is too short. It's so obvious, time
So I guess we recorded that, and it came out and it did respectably. And I'm not quite sure the sequence of events after that, because we were doing various bits of things. At this time I would be living in Gateshead, and Rhythm Clicks were Elaine Graham, myself, and a guy called Andy Stone, who was a guy who'd been on the Newcastle punk scene and was I think he was a philosophy student at Newcastle University, and a guy called Andrew Proudfoot, who was another guy from Furry Hill who I knew. So we recorded various bits and pieces. I think we did some recording at Durham University as well, and ultimately we recorded the single, and it came out and it did okay. But then after that, I don't know whether Andy was coming towards the end of his degree or whatever, but we just seemed to fall apart. We did a gig that I think you said that you were at
the New Time
Theatre with the Fallen Cabaret Voltaire, and that was an interesting experience. Fabulous place to play. It was really, really lovely. And true to form, I think we did a version of the Velvet Underground's Ocean that night, if I remember correctly. Right. It was interesting, and I think we had some okay songs, but I don't think that I don't think the band had the dynamism that was needed really to push forward, and I think that the luck thing that happened with Penetration didn't happen. You know, it was a time where you were really, I think there had been a lot of changes. Punk rock had kind of gone through various phases.
Yeah.
We were more interested, I think, in more oppositional and challenging music than was around at the time. And as a result of that, we were our own worst enemies in terms of commerciality was concerned.
If you can't fit into
we didn't fit nicely into it. Yeah,
the genre as such, then how can you sell it?
That's right, and we weren't trying very hard either.
I was just going to ask you about your feelings in that band compared to Penetrations. I know you were a few years older. Just your thoughts, because like you say, you didn't get many gigs done. Recording was minimal. And did you have any long-term plans with the band?
I think we did at the time, but in retrospect, I don't think that the amount of effort was enough to turn in. I think there were bands that were successful that were possibly not much different. But again, goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You know, a mediocre band in London can go a long way.
So you still feel that being from the northeast?
I think it's I think if we'd relocated ourselves in London, we would have probably had more attention, and there would have been more opportunities. But we didn't, and that band ultimately split. But thanks to we had a little bit more success, I think, with Soul on Ice, which ironically did less gigs. I think Soul on Ice, the band that recorded, never played live ever.
Right.
So we were a studio band,
Right.
but we played a few London gigs with a lineup that was included a guy called Larry Lunn who played drums, and we went down to London and we did a few gigs in the area, and we played at the ICA with on one of those John Peel weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing all right, I think, and and Tony Koschever sort of said, yeah, we'll record an album. He just, without really thinking about it too much and without actually ever hearing anything. So Tony financed an album. Larry departed, and we recruited a drummer. It was Elaine Graham, and I'm married to Elaine, and have been since 1978. So we met all those years ago. So I guess that's a successful part of what I did. We recorded for about a fortnight, and we recorded a Soul on Ice album, from which the two singles were called that you'll have possibly heard. Underwater and Widescreen, 7-inch and a 12-inch. What we did was we went, we recorded at Guardian in Pitty Mee in Durham, which was, I think at the time, probably the only 24-track studio in the northeast.
With Terry?
With Terry Cavigan, yes, who was an interesting gentleman.
He was.
And I think we would have done, if Terry hadn't had to eat, we would have probably done it in a week rather than a fortnight. But
Terry did have a habit of going
for bacon sandwiches.
He had his house was built on, that's right, and he used to go off and come back a few hours later.
A few hours later, that's right. Yeah, that was a very much a factor of our sessions there. So anyway, Terry recorded us, and we had a guy called Rob Warby, who was he does a lot of stuff on Radio 3 now. He's and I think he's one of Michael Nyman's assistants. And Rob produced the sessions that were recorded there. This was after we'd done some demos, and we weren't very happy with the mixes. So some of the things that you've got on the CD there, versions of the songs that were demos. And then there are some that came from the Guardian sessions that were then taken down to London. We went to a studio in London called Bury Street. We went down for a weekend, and we mixed Underwater, and we put on some other guitars, and we did some various bits and pieces with it. A few overdubs and remixed it at Bury Street with a guy called Dave Anderson engineering. And Bury Street and Dave Anderson, they'd done all of the On You Sound stuff,
right.
Loads of Keith LeBlanc and
Very
stuff
dub.
like that. Very dub, which is what we were wanting to get. We didn't achieve it, but that's what we were.
So you had an idea of what you were looking
Oh
for
yeah,
at that
yeah,
point,
yeah.
for Soul on
But it
Ice.
was written in the studio, more or less. We rehearsed for a week, went into the studio and recorded, and we in our minds when we went in, and I don't think that anything that's on there actually reflects what we had in our minds.
Underwater, slowly moving forward, nearer to the surface. Underwater, slowly moving
But in our minds, we were thinking about things like the cyclical drumming of Can, and we were thinking about the kind of things that were around, I suppose, some of the more experimental guitar things that were going on at the time. So a lot of noise, really. And we recorded these pieces that were what you hear that were sort of edits of very, very long studio jams that were then turned into songs. So Underwater and Widescreen were probably the two most songy songs of all of them. A lot of the other stuff was very
possibly commercial.
Yeah. I think they were more. I think it was much more. I think the Soul and Ice stuff, even though it was recorded in such a sort of haphazard and experimental way, was much more commercial than the Rhythm Click stuff.
I think the music scene at that time was more open to experimental.
I think it was. Yeah, and I mean, it was coming on the back of the pop group and all of that sort of thing, which had been a huge influence on me. I thought the pop group were fabulous, And I did read a review of one of one of the tracks on the B-side, I think, of Underwater, and they said it sounded like Shriekback. I can't ever remember hearing what Shriekback. I couldn't remember what they sounded like, so
it's
I don't know.
Probably a more...
Were they sort of a Gang of Four type thing?
They were funk.
Yeah. Well, we had that. We certainly had that element in there. We had that in.
There was no danger in Shriekback though. When you compare it with a pop group, Shriekback were quite. Can't think of the word, but like sort of
mellow.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, I don't
know if is that a positive.
I don't know.
Comment about Soul on Ice.
I don't know. It might be. It might be.
Were you looking for a reaction?
I think so. I mean, we did a couple of interviews and things, and we were. I think we were probably. I think the singles both did all right. Actually, I mean, the Widescreen was Kid Jensen's record of the week.
Really?
Yeah, and it got into the lower reaches of the indie charts, I think.
Lights up, widescreen.
We're getting
So-
a bit carried away at this point.
Well, I thought we were going to. I thought we
You
were
were
going to
going
have
far.
a second flush of success, and we acquired a manager, and that's when it went all horribly wrong. I just don't think I work very well with managers, and I honestly don't know what happened, but there was some kind of a spat between the manager and Tony Koschever at the record company, and the album never came out. I was totally disillusioned with the music business. I basically stopped, and I stopped for a long time. I went to university, and I did a degree in communication studies, and surprisingly enough I did all right, and then I worked in television for a while. Did about 3 years in television and working as a university lecturer.
Was that locally?
I worked at Sunderland Uni, and I worked at a place called North East Media Training Centre, which was a centre set up to train people in media skills who wouldn't normally be able to access that kind of training. It was set up after the demise of the Tyne-Wear Metropolitan County Council, funded from that. Fabulous facility, marvellous 24-track recording studio, full studio, television studio with gallery, Jonathan Gibbs and all the stuff that you'd need to make a feature film and more. 16mm cameras, Super 16 cameras, Betacam SP edit suite, which was state of the art at the time, and I got to play with all of those toys, which was fantastic. And then the money ran out. So that was that really, and I guess until maybe about 2008, from sort of 86. I graduated in 86. I always played the guitar, I always recorded, but until about 2008, 2009, I didn't seriously play with any other musicians. I didn't go out, didn't venture onto a stage or any of that sort of thing. More recently, I mean, I actually recorded a few bits and pieces, which you've got on a CD there.
Have you got a final name for that project?
Well, there's a project that I'm working on now, which is its working title's Quarter Light, and there are 4 instrumental pieces there, which may find some vocals on them at some point. But on the CD, you've got some soul and ice, you've got rhythm clicks, and there's an interesting thing that I did with, or I think it's interesting, an electronic piece I did with a guy called Ian Boddy, who is an electronic musician from the North East, who's got quite a reputation. Yeah, Ian is internationally renowned, and this was recorded at Spectro many years ago.
Smile
And then there's a Lowdown EP which I recorded in 2010 with some friends, which is a band that I did a few gigs with, did a few sort of festival gigs and things like that, but I think it was very much something that was a passing interest for me, that kind of thing.
What were your feelings at this point? Were you thinking about getting into music seriously, or is this just a...
No, I don't think about getting into music seriously. I think music is something that they actually going right back to the very beginning. I think you have the most freedom when you have the least connection with the music business. So it swings and roundabouts, you know. So we live in an age now where record companies as we know them are almost non-existent. You know, how we knew them in the days prior to punk, they don't exist in that way. So the digital revolution has allowed everyone to have fabulous recording facilities, and I'm lucky enough to have fabulous recording facilities. So I can indulge all of the things I want to do, and I can be as extreme as I want. Now, audience-wise, I'm not. I'm not playing to a massive audience, but at the same time, I do have the benefit of being able to just do the things that I want to do. So that's quite eclectic. So I've got kind of an element that's quite commercial and rocky. But I've also got an element that's as far in the opposite direction, which has electronic noodlings and doodlings and all kinds of sort of more extreme guitar things, which I'm also interested in. So
But you think, going right back, the initial kind of feeling of punk, that's what it was kind of encouraging at the very beginning, and a lot of people misinterpreted it.
I think, I think so. I think that Year Zero thing, more so the effect that it had on record companies and the establishment, the music business establishment, I think that was a really good thing. I think the fact that, you know, bands could be in charge of their own destiny is kind of like what you've got now. Musicians can be in charge of what they do, and they can put things out through their own channels, and that's a really positive thing, I think. I think punk rock was very, very quickly subverted, and it became just another branch of the establishment. I think the record companies, the publishing companies, the agencies, they all they all had a scrabble where they all wanted to get their own little bit of punk rock, and I think lots of bands were signed in that feeding frenzy that went on at the time, and I think it probably had a detrimental effect on the way that the music developed for a lot of people, because it became very homogeneous, and it became by the time you had your second and third wave of punk bands, they were very much the antithesis of what the punk movement was about.
all about, yeah.
So all of the interesting things, the politically interesting things and the musically interesting things were squeezed out of it, and you ended up with Oi.
Yeah.
And
I mean, some people will say though Oi kind of took it back to the working man, to the
yeah, but I would say that punk rock was really...
It was an art.
It was an art school phenomenon.
Some people don't like to accept that, and
well,
there's an inverted
they might not like
about
they
it.
might not like to accept it, but that's
It's
what
true.
it was.
I agree.
Punk rock was an art school thing. We were unusual, those of us who were in the northeast, because we didn't really have art schools up here. We had technical colleges, and we were unusual in that Penetration were a punk rock band that didn't have that background, but by God we would have loved to have had. I think we'd have all loved to have gone to art school and done something, just dust around for a few years learning how to be creative. That would have been great, but punk rock provided that for us in a way. That was our art school, and we did and I think that that's where Roxy Music came from. That was the genesis of the Who, and all of those bands were all, John Lennon and all of those people. It's an interesting line that you can trace through. There are a couple of things that I'd like to talk about.
In conversation with Gary Chaplin on a new music in a different kitchen.
But the vast majority of the bands were actually fairly straightforward rock outfits. And I would include the one I was in that.
I was going to ask you, like, were you a bit stifled at the time because of that you were just part of rock and roll tradition, really?
Well, you were. I think that was kind of one of the reasons that I was particularly disenchanted, because it felt like it was going to be. It was more of the same. I remember someone saying to me, "You and Pauline, you're going to be like Ronnie Wood and Rod Stewart." And this guy who's from the management company, I thought to myself, what are you saying? If you might think it, but it's so wrong in the context of where we've come from and what we're trying to do. And there was all sorts of things like that sort of fed into it for me and give me that horrible sinking feeling, and I just felt like I don't want to be part of it anymore, and I want to do something that's different, which I guess is where things like rhythm clicks and all of the other stuff have come from. That was an opportunity for me to indulge all of the like bleepy squeaky nonsense that I wanted to.
Well, you were one of many. I think a lot of people came out of punk and used it positively. I mean, we are like reflecting on the negative side, but there was a lot of positiveness which came out in post-punk.
Yeah, I think I was always seeking out knowledge, but I think if I hadn't had my experience in the punk movement, I probably would have been I'm pleased I had that experience. I would have been a totally different person to the one I am now, and I probably would have stayed in a job, an ordinary job. I would have probably been retired now. But thanks to punk rock, I'll probably be going till I'm about 75. I would have been retired. I would have had a normal career. I would have probably done all right, but I would probably have never had what was the other really, I think, mind-expanding experience of as a working class lad going into the university system and being exposed to lots of different radical political ideas and being exposed to lots of different ideas about art and culture, which I think had as much effect on me as the short time that punk rock happened. And I'm pleased about that, because I feel quite rounded, and I feel that I've got quite a lot of I've had a lot of interesting experiences, and there are not many people who can probably say they've had Sid Vicious on one knee and Nancy Spungen on the other, and have a degree in communication studies.
That's something, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So Gary Chaplin 2014.
Yeah.
What does the future hold? Anything musically?
Yeah, I think I'll probably be doing some. There is certainly a performance, probably the last performance of the trio that I've got, Glider, on the 26th of April. That's in Durham at a little known venue called the Empty Shop on Milburn Gate Bridge.
Right.
So I'm doing that on the 26th of April. And that's kind of a farewell gig for Dave, the bass player, who's going off on a world tour. But I'm working on some new material, and I'm doing some work with Johnny Brown from the band of Holy Joy. We're talking about some collaborations and writing some songs together, so that might be an interesting experience.
Very interesting.
And I'll be doing a live session on Resonance FM. And I'd like to come back here and do one with you as well at some point.
Most definitely.
Good. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Gary.
You're welcome. It's been great talking to you.
Absolutely brilliant.
Excellent. Good.
Thank you.